And so all I'm asking you to do is do the right thing by kids in this state. A vote for this bill is a vote for kids. And if you want to talk about gambling and you're concerned about addictions, I have not seen a bill since I've been in the Georgia General Assembly to repeal the lottery. I have not seen a bill since I've been in the Georgia General Assembly come to the floor to repeal the Hope Scholarship. I've never seen a bill.
Senator Derek Mallow offers his fiery take on the sports betting bill debate. He questioned balancing concerns over gambling with the needs of children on a list waiting to get into Georgia's pre-K programs. Good evening. Welcome to Lawmakers on day 14 of the Georgia legislative session. I'm Donna Lowry in Atlanta. We'll have a lot more on the online sports betting bill coming up, including analysis of that legislation and more from two journalists who cover the General Assembly. They'll tell us why proponents believe this is the year they may actually get the legislation to the governor's desk. They'll also talk about other bills moving along this session. And also, the House Majority Leader gives us his take on several priorities in his chamber and his perspective on the hotly debated bill in the Senate that would create a new city in Gwinnett County. But first, let's get to an overview of the day from our Capitol correspondent, Sarah Callis.
Hi, Donna. Lawmakers continue the debate on a familiar issue under the Gold Dome today. A bill legalizing sports betting made its annual appearance in the Senate today. SB 386 would legalize online sports betting and be incorporated into the Georgia Lottery Corporation.
And this is purely a sports betting bill. There's no other wagering that is defined in this bill. It has to do with just sports betting. And quite frankly, unfortunately, in the state of Georgia, this is already happening illegally with no guidelines, no parameters that surround sports betting here. This would create those regulations and parameters to protect bettors, and it would also generate just over $100 million based on the estimates that would go to Georgia Pre-K and to the Hope Scholarship and the Zell Miller Scholarship.
The bipartisan sponsored bill would provide 16 licenses for various sports betting operators, which would include sports teams and events in the state. It also prevents people from placing bets using credit cards and certain people from wagering on events.
As far as prohibited bettors, there's very extensive language in here about the prohibited bettors. Highlights of that would be employees of the Lottery Corporation, vendors or licensees could not bet on sports betting. Anyone involved in the professional or amateur teams, along with the players, employees, professional sports team players, umpires, league personnel, coaches would all be prohibited from betting on sports betting.
Support came from both sides of the aisle, with several senators citing the need for the additional education funding that the betting would create.
First of all, education, as we know, is the key. We all pretty much have agreed on that. Education is the key to making sure that our citizens are successful. We have some disagreements when we talk about wraparound services, how we kind of fund education and things of that nature, but our fundamental agreement is on education. Second thing that we pretty much have agreed with in Georgia is that this lottery has helped move us forward. This lottery has helped move us forward. In fact, we were the leaders in the nation as far as tapping into this particular funding source. And that's how we ought to look at it, is tapping into a particular funding source. We led the nation. But somewhere, quite frankly, we actually got behind, and we've allowed other persons to beat us as far as tapping into other lottery funding sources, and this bill allows us to do that.
But the bill was opposed as it was written, and 2 amendments were proposed. Amendment number 1 would require voters to amend the Constitution to allow sports betting.
To pass this bill without making it be contingent upon the voters of this state being allowed to weigh in and approve it is disingenuous at best and just sneaky to try to circumvent the voters of the state of Georgia.
Amendment 2 would prohibit a sports team from being able to profit from the betting.
You're saying, as this bill is currently drafted, all of these sports franchises that can partner with a bookmaker, essentially, can share in the profits from the winnings of the bets?
That's exactly true.
And they can also affect the outcome by either running up a score to cover a point spread or shaving points, as we've seen in the past, to make certain that certain bets win or lose, since they have a financial stake in the outcome of the bets.
That is the exact point of this amendment, Senator.
But there was still strong opposition to allowing gambling on other grounds.
And if we're going to act on this today, Mr. President, I think we need to make those two corrections to not let those who run the enterprise be the House, which I think has a greater corrupting value even than betting. And then lastly, let's not create a two-tier system of justice where regular folks who are subject to serious misdemeanor treatment and fines be subject to criminal responsibility when we have specifically avoided criminal responsibility for those who run these sprawling enterprises.
Amendment 1, requiring the constitutional amendment, passed. Amendment 2 failed. Despite the impassioned debate, SB 386 passed 35-15. Religious groups like the Georgia Baptist Mission Board are continuing to advocate against sports betting. They say that legalizing sports betting would not help children, even if it creates more scholarship money.
Again, they use the placebo of it's for the children. And legalizing and extending moral vices has its greatest negative impact on our children.
SB 333 would call for a local vote to create the city of Mulberry in northeast Gwinnett County. Local control over rapid growth in the area was the main reason given for its incorporation.
There's a commissioner in the area that has taken it initiative and a policy to vote against new apartment zonings, new high-density residential zonings in the area, because there's already 14,000 apartments in this district, District 4 in Gwinnett County. And there's infrastructure issues, and that's part of the other reason that he's trying to slow down some of these higher density zonings.
But other members of the Gwinnett caucus claimed partisan politics were at play, that the bill was created hastily to bypass the Democratic control of the county board over zoning issues.
Incidentally, this same commissioner who now has the resolution, when the zoning hearing came about for this density location that we're referring to, he was upset. So he went running to his legislators, his Republican colleagues, and that's how we got to this City of Mulberry bill.
The bill passed 30-18. It was a quieter day in the House. Lawmakers approved an amended rules calendar that swapped Monday's floor session for a new date, February 16th. The change allows members to attend the late Rules Chairman Richard Smith's memorial service. And the men and women at the Capitol wore red today to advocate for women's heart health. 2024 marks the American Heart Association's 20th year of advocacy. Lawmakers will convene again on Tuesday for day 15 after a memorial service for Chairman Richard Smith on Monday. That's all for my Capitol report. Donna, back to you.
Sarah, thank you for that update. We had a leader in the Senate on the show yesterday. Today, it's leadership in the House. Joining me is House Majority Leader Chuck Epstration of Auburn, which is located just north of Decula in Gwinnett County. Welcome to Lawmakers. As usual, we always love having you on. Let's start with something that Sarah talked about. It happened today in the Senate, the passage of the Mulberry cityhood bill. It will allow voters in that area to decide if they want to be a city. That's the area you represent in northern Gwinnett County. So tell us more about it.
Well, it's great to be with you, Donna. So this idea really came about because constituents were saying we would like local control for issues of planning and zoning. Currently in Gwinnett County, we have 4 district commissions that have 250,000 residents each in those areas. And certainly as issues of traffic congestion, school overcrowding are made, constituents have been crying out in a nonpartisan way, saying we would really like to have greater local control. We would like to be able to communicate our concerns to someone who lives in this area and can represent our values at the local government level. So that's where this idea originally came from, and it's been very well received within the area that would be this new city. There would be no city property taxes as part of this proposal, and would really just focus on reflecting the concerns that residents have raised. They're not anti-growth. They just want responsible growth as this part of Gwinnett, northern, eastern, unincorporated Gwinnett, continues to grow in the future.
So they wouldn't control everything, so like public safety and parks and things like that. Explain that.
That's right. There would only be limited services, planning and zoning, inspections and ordinance violations, and stormwater management. Other services are delivered through the county through a service delivery agreement reached between the cities, all of the cities in Gwinnett, and the county government. And that will continue going forward. Really, to a resident in the area, there'd be little change to your daily life, what you see as far as services being provided. The only real difference would be being able to speak out and feel that you're heard when there's planning and zoning concerns.
So you told me that it'll be the largest in land mass, but not the largest in population in Gwinnett County.
That's right. It would be the second largest city by population behind Peachtree Corners. Peachtree Corners is actually a great example. It passed in 2012 and has no city property taxes as well. And the bill that was passed and the referendum that was considered by voters at the time was viewed as somewhat controversial. Gwinnett County took a position of caution and neutrality toward it at the time. And I think since then we've seen just how successful Peachtree Corners has been. Residents there love it, and they feel that that city has really been a great triumph for Gwinnett. We think that Mulberry is going to be the same thing in the future. I
will say in the Senate today, some Democratic members of the Gwinnett County delegation objected to the bill, and here's what Senator Nabila Islam Parks said.
To label this proposal as half-baked is an overstatement. What we have before us is not just a poorly conceived plan for a new city, it's a glaring example of hasty and irresponsible governance. Let's be clear, the creation of Mulberry is not a product of community desire or demonstrated need. It's a concept hastily thrown together without due diligence, originally supported by a county commissioner who represents the area, who has since expressed reservations. This proposal, masquerading as City Light, is not only constitutionally questionable according to the Carl Vinson Institute, but it also threatens to siphon crucial funds from Gwinnett County citizens and could hurt the financial health of the entire county.
So your reaction to that, is it going to siphon money from the rest of Gwinnett County?
Well, absolutely not, in the sense that the city is going to be providing new services, offloading some of the service responsibilities from Gwinnett. Really couldn't disagree more with what was just played. This proposal has been carefully vetted, a feasibility study is being completed. There is an anticipation of $9.5 million in revenue that would be received by the city. But considering Gwinnett's $2.5 billion budget, this is of minimal impact, and services that Gwinnett is currently provided would now be taken over by the city to provide those. I think that ultimately this is an issue for the voters to decide. For me, it's not sufficient when voters come to me and say, hey, we have a real problem with growth and overcrowding, please do something. For me to just say, call your county commissioner, that's insufficient. I brought a proposal here forward, and it will only become a reality if voters support it on a ballot. And so I think that that's important to recognize. This just gives local control to the issue of planning and zoning and growth, which continues to be a very hot topic.
Yeah, well, we'll keep up with it. I know you're carrying it in the House, so we'll see what happens in the House.
Great.
Let's switch gears a little bit. You're a former prosecutor, and I know public safety is a big concern. What kind of bills, what priorities in public safety would you like to see this session?
Well, the House of Representatives continues to advance the issue of public safety in our state. It's been a priority over the past few years. Georgians deserve to feel safe, particularly when they're in their own homes, and we have prioritized legislation to not only address criminal activity, gang activity, but also to support law enforcement. In the budget this year, there's a proposal for a $3,000 pay increase for law enforcement officers. That's a $9,000 pay raise for frontline law enforcement in the past 2 years alone. Additionally, we're working to expand the size of the state patrol, which often helps local law enforcement needs, public safety needs, and continuing to go after gangs is always a priority. It's estimated that a majority of all violent crime in Georgia is in some way gang-related. There are over 14,000 believed gang members within our state prison system, and really working to address this gang problem could have a profound benefit for public safety throughout the state. So I expect that we're going to be working on these issues throughout the session.
Yeah, I know education is something you're going to look at too.
Absolutely. So Georgia has really done incredible work in raising teacher salaries. There's a proposed $2,500 pay increase for teachers this year. Of course, there was the $1,000 pay bonus also in December. There's been $10,000 in pay raises for Georgia teachers over the past 5 years. Georgia is now the leader in the Southeast for teacher starting salary. And we really, I think, have done great work there. There is also in the budget money to allow for a $45,000 school safety grant for each school in Georgia. That money is actually going to be in the budget. So as schools see appropriate to hire an additional school resource officer or put in infrastructure to protect those schools, that will continue to be there. And the final thing I'll mention is school literacy continues to be childhood literacy is so important. So third grade reading levels, as you know, Donna, is a real benchmark for a student's future success. There's $11 million in the budget to address literacy throughout the state. And we also have some terrific legislation that we're continuing to work on. We passed last year and are working on this year to address that.
Okay, we don't have a lot of time, but before you leave, I want to ask you about something somber, and that is that we lost Chairman Richard Smith, who died earlier this week. He was your seatmate, plus you were on rules with him. Talk a little bit about him. Well,
Chairman Richard Smith was an incredible friend, mentor, and leader for our state. As you mentioned, he and I were seatmates. We sat next to each other in the chamber for 8 years. And you really get to know someone when you sit so close to them. I saw his leadership for the state. He was willing to be a mentor to me, but also I just realized what a great man he was. He loved his family, his wife Clara, and his grandchildren were who he talked about all the time. And he was respected by Republican and Democratic members in the State House of Representatives. He will be sorely missed. The state capitol will not be the same place without him. Yeah, I know his funeral is on Monday, and there will be no session that day. I want to thank you so much for coming on the show. As always, you're a great guest. I appreciate that. It's great to be with you. Thank you. Now, coming up, perspectives on some of the action under the Gold Dome. This week, from two journalists who have covered the Georgia legislative session for years. It's a conversation you don't want to miss, so stay with us.
Lawmakers is made possible by Georgia Farm Bureau. With over 80 years of helping everyone understand the importance of agriculture in our state. After all, ag is Georgia's #1 industry. Food and fiber production represents over $74 billion in output of Georgia's strong economy. The Georgia Farm Bureau legislative team works to represent producers across Georgia at the state capitol during the session and year-round. Georgia Farm Bureau, the voice of Georgia farmers.
People put their faith in PBS because they know that it is constantly delivering quality. It covers the whole of the United States. It's a free and independent media.
We go where the viewers are.
What are the conversations that are happening right now?
We feel that civil discourse is a civic responsibility.
What we do is authentic reporting that people can trust.
We give time so you can hear voices on all sides of an issue.
This is the place that people turn to for stories that matter.
And they know that when they walk away, they will have learned something about the world around them.
That's why this makes PBS important for daily life and, in the end, our world.
Thank you for joining us.
Community. Learning, working, playing, celebrating, doing life is always better together. At GPB, we aim to provide you with the tools to be able to do life together well. Our mission to educate, inform, and entertain inspires everything from our wide range of programming to our stimulating radio conversations to our fun in-person events. We've got something for everyone. Visit gpb.org/community to learn more about our upcoming events.
Welcome back to Lawmakers. I'm Donna Lowry. The General Assembly is now at a point where the chambers are starting to vote on more bills. Today, the Senate had a long day, and joining us are two journalists who covered it all. Maya Prabhu covers Georgia government and politics for the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, And Rahul Bali is the politics reporter at WABE Radio. He spent time with us here on Lawmakers for years. He was a Capitol correspondent, so we always love to have him back, and we always love having you on. So the big thing in the Senate today, big debate, several hours over the sports betting bill. There's a bit of deja vu to all of it. So I'll get you to start off with your observations from all of that.
Yeah, I actually think deja vu was one of my headlines. You know, I've been writing on this topic for 6 legislative sessions now, I'm going to say. And it just seems to be never ending. People can't all get on the same page about how they want to go about it. So today, Senator Clint Dixon passed his bill to allow online sports betting in Georgia. And then there's been these 2 schools of thought of whether or not residents need to change the Constitution to expand gambling past the lottery. Senator Dixon said we didn't need to and introduced his bill that way, but then Senator Bill Cowsert disagreed, introduced an amendment, and they added that amendment to the bill.
Yeah, and actually last year, the former Supreme Court Chief Justice Harold Melton actually came out and said it didn't need to be an amendment, but in the end, that's what they decided to go for.
Yeah, you know, in the grand scheme of things, the discussions are this. First, what kind of gambling, the money that's coming in, is it just online sports and mobile sports betting? Is it horse racing? It's casinos. And on the other side is, what do you do with that money? You know, if you talk to 5 lawmakers just walking out, they'll give you 5 different answers of what that money should be used for. In this case, what Clint Dixon was proposing is keep it all under the Georgia lottery, and then the money goes to pre-K and only goes to the Hope Scholarship. And that's what was done with this bill. Now, what I'm going to be looking for, first of all, is what did today's changes mean to the bill? That's going to be one of the things I'm going to be looking at. But the other thing I'm going to be looking at is what's the next set of legislation that comes behind what was done today? Is it someone's going to propose horse racing? Is someone going to propose casino gambling? Is someone going to say, just keep online sports betting? There's so many things in the air right now about what was done today and what's next.
Yeah, I think the interesting thing about it is, okay, so now you're going to have an amendment. You're going to the people. Why not throw some more in there under that gambling umbrella? So there may be some discussion about that.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I always say. I'm not a politician, but if I were, if you're expending political capital to expand gambling in the state, and Republicans have been resistant to do that because of their faith-based base. So if you're going to use political capital, why just do sports betting when sports betting is the one that would bring in the least amount of revenue for the state? Why not also add casinos, and why not also add horse racing? And that was one of the arguments that was being made during the during the debate today. They said we oppose this amendment because this is just a way for you to add casinos. And you know, Senator Cowsert said that's not what I'm doing, but we'll see. We don't have a referendum yet, so we'll see what it says.
Yeah. So now we've certainly got the House. I want you to go ahead.
I think the key thing to know there is there's probably enough votes that if they add casinos and add horse racing, that you'll lose some of those votes. There's this group of Republicans, they're okay with just doing online sports betting because they know what's going on and they know the sports teams want to do it. But there's probably also a group that would be concerned if the money went anywhere other than the Hope Scholarship and pre-K. This is so tenuous. Whatever gets done, it feels like the path is going to end up being very, very narrow of where's the money coming from and then where the money is going.
Yeah, and then if you add something else to sports betting, the sports betting people may fear that they're going to lose in the end if something else is added. So there's a lot to this. Is there the feeling that we're still going to see the other issues in gambling come up at some point? Do you see that? Or are we going to just see sports betting for now?
You know, there were some, so I am a cynic, and so they've been every year, this is the year it's going to pass, and so I say I believe it when I see it. But, you know, there were some representatives from casinos in town today, you know, talking with stakeholders about what a casino in Atlanta and casinos in Georgia could bring to the state. That's been, you know, it's been 6 years for sports betting. I think it's been 10 years now for casinos. I really don't know. I don't know what the appetite is. I don't know if that constitutional amendment was a poison pill. We're just going to have to see. But if I was betting, I'm going to say no.
Okay.
Now, are you betting online? I'm kidding.
Yeah, that's the thing.
I think when Senate Bill 386 was proposed, this was going to be the narrow path. And now that this amendment's there, I think the door has now opened. There's probably already some legislation that's been filed that we haven't had a chance to even look at, and there's probably more legislation coming. I think the door is opened on the debate now because of what happened today.
Will they have an easier path in the House now that the Senate has done it? Senate was more the stumbling block, not necessarily.
I feel like the other way around. I feel like almost every year the Senate sends a sports betting bill over to the House. It gets out of committee and then it never makes it to the floor. So I think the issue is in the House, and I think it's that they're fighting over where the money is supposed to go, like Raul said.
One last thing on this: the licenses. There was talk about the licenses for sports betting, and what's that all about? Because there will be people who will take over when it comes to sports betting.
Right. So I think there's talking about issuing 16 licenses in the state. 7 would be for any corporation that wanted to come in and apply for it. And then I believe it's 8 that go to sports team, the Atlanta sports teams, Augusta National.
Atlanta Motor Speedway.
Yes.
Yeah.
And there's one more.
And then one for the Georgia Lottery.
And then one for the Georgia Lottery itself. So
there's still a lot left on all of this. Yeah, so we'll wait and see.
But the interesting discussion there, which was John Alber's amendment, was should the sports team make money directly off the bets?
Right.
And so that was kind of that discussion there.
Yeah. Okay, I want to talk about another thing that was big today, and that was cash bond bill, the cash bond bill. For people who don't understand, explain what that's all about.
So typically when someone is arrested, they go before a judge, and a judge will set a bond. And for some of the low-level nonviolent offenses, misdemeanors, you can often leave with just a signature bond. You just sign and say, I'm going to come back for my first appearance in court. But Republican lawmakers, Randy Robertson said, it's creating this revolving door. People aren't showing up. They have no incentive to show up. If they don't have any skin in the game, they haven't put any money down. And so he added about 30 new offenses, felonies and misdemeanors, that a judge would require them to pay some type of money in order to be released.
Yeah, and the big debate was over charities, because you can only give the money 3 times, I think, according to the bill. And so there are even churches or different places who bail somebody out will not be able to do it under this bill more than 3 times.
Or individuals. You know, if you have a problem child who maybe gets arrested a few times, like after 3 times, you're not supposed to be able to bail him out. So it's interesting to see. This is the compromise that the House and Senate reached, because this bill was in play last year, and they fought over it over the interim, and this is where we landed. And so, yeah, it's very interesting bill to me.
Yeah, what passed out was the conference committee version of all of this. Let's talk about just overall the session so far. You guys have been doing this a while. How would you assess this one to some in the past?
The past 2 years have had reasons for interruptions. UGA playing in the national title game. Right. You had inauguration last year. This year, it just felt like it's been kind of nonstop. I think it was last week, I stayed late 3 days. And normally, late days are kind of later in the session. Mm-hmm. We're already having late days, and we're already having long debates. And so, yeah, it's been a lot. There is a lot. Yes, it is an election year.
It is. So it's different in that sense, definitely. You can feel that it's an election year. Yeah.
And we've had consequential bills pretty early in the session. We had anti-Semitism. Right. We had the bail bill today. Mm-hmm. So, and there's more coming. And I'm looking ahead to next week, where there's some expectation that we're going to see what the House budget writers did with the governor's proposed amended 2024 budget, the budget that covers the current funding of state government. I'd love to see some of the changes that they made there, because normally the amended budget is not something massive, but there's billions of extra dollars in there, and I want to see the changes the House makes.
Well, you'll be watching, and people will be tuning in and reading about what you're talking about. Thanks so much for both of you being here. That does it for Lawmakers this week. We will return on Tuesday. The legislative calendar planned a day off tomorrow, and the General Assembly is taking Monday off, so members can attend the funeral for Representative Richard Smith in Columbus. The House Rules Chairman died earlier this week. Have a good night.